Well, avid readers, I have a friend today, and I'm pretty sure she's a familiar name to most of you, Angela Hunt. I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about The Daughter of Rome, which is her newest release. We're going to dig into this in a minute, but first, Angie, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you, Trisha. I just joined Avid Readers a couple of months ago, and I've had so much fun reading everybody's posts and marveling at the variety of books that are represented there. So I really appreciate this opportunity to join you today. And let's see, introduce myself. I've been writing for probably more than 40 years, and my roots would show it if I just hadn't colored them. And yeah, and I'm married to a youth pastor who's retired, but I still send him out to do youth pastor work every day because I need space sometimes to write. And we have two children who are grown, and I have three dogs, two of whom are mastiffs, and best breed in the world. I just love my puppies and chickens. And have you seen that YouTube video that's going around? Well, actually, it's on Facebook, where the woman finds an egg and she wraps it up and she drives very top secret with like James Bond music playing in the background, and she goes to the Barnes and Noble and she sets it on the counter, and the lady there looks around and she takes the egg, and then she brings out from behind the counter the stack of books, like 12 books, and they do the exchange, and then she runs out the store. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. That sounds so funny, though.
It's hysterical. With the price of eggs today, it's
I
worth
know.
about a dozen books. Yeah, so it's very cute. So we have chickens, and even my husband now loves the chickens because they have a lot of personality.
I will keep wanting to get chickens. And my husband's like, we have all these kids. We have 5 dogs. We have all the books. He's like, we're not going to do chickens. I'm like, okay. So,
Yeah, I wanted to do goats and mini cows, and every time I bring up an animal, my husband says, "That's a barnyard animal. You need a barn." Oh,
we can't do that. Can't do that. Oh,
unfortunately, we don't have room for a barn.
yeah. Oh, well, I am so excited to talk about Daughter of Rome. Now, what number book is this, Angie? Because, like, you have written a lot.
Well, the last time I counted, I was at 165. And I think I may have written 3 or 4 since then, but I only count like once a year, so
Yeah, I know
I
something.
honestly don't know.
That's a lot of books. And so I love, first of all, I love anything to do with Rome and this era.
Hmm.
I would just love to hear. I mean, we have the main character is a sculptor's daughter, and her world is turned upside down. But I would love to hear kind of the, like, you give the pitch for it, and then why this was a book that you wanted to write.
Okay. Well, first of all, this is the final book in what I call the Emissary series. I had done this series of books. I started with, I did some Old Testament books, and then I did 4 books set in the silent years, and then I did 4 books set during the time of Jesus's
Mhm.
ministry. And then I thought, well, just chronologically, the next thing to do is to move into Paul's ministry. But there's that thing when you're writing real historical people, especially if they're biblical, and a lot of people don't like you to put words in their mouth. So I thought, I'm going to do the after effects of Paul's visit. So the first book was set in Philippi, where he had established a church, and it's about some folks there. The second was set in Corinth, where he had established a church there. And so this third one is set in Rome. And Paul is not there at the moment when the book opens because he's out on another one of his journeys, but he's been there. And Priscilla and Aquila are there, and a lot of people who got arrested in book 2, they're in Rome because they got taken to
Oh,
Rome
right.
to wait for sentencing by Nero. And so I wanted to write this book because I'm like you. I'm fascinated by all things Roman. I think we've seen Gladiator, 20, 30 times? How about you?
Yeah.
And but I grew up reading The Silver Chalice and The Robe and The Big Fisherman and all those epic Roman kind of stories, and Roman and Christianity mixed. And
Hmm.
so I've always been fascinated by it. And chronologically, it just sort of fit in the scheme of where I was I kind of have this idea in the back of my head that I'm going to write my way through the Bible. Um, but anyway, I just thought, I love this. So I have characters from the first book and the second book who show up in Rome. It's the first time I've ever done that. Usually when I'm done with the book, I
Yeah,
move on.
they're gone. Yeah.
Yeah, but this one it just seemed normal because all roads lead to Rome. It just seemed right to bring them all back, and some, well, I don't want to give away anything, but anyway, they all do show back up, but they're not the main character. The main character is, as you mentioned, a sculptor's daughter, and the Great Fire of Rome, which happened in AD 54, happens in this book. And it really just decimated Rome, except, oddly enough, it did not bother the Jewish quarter, which was across the street. So a lot of the Romans fled to the other side of the river, the Tiber, and were sheltering with these Jewish folks who took them in, and a lot of them were converts to Christianity. And so several of my Roman characters accept Christ through the example and the testimony of these Christians, but not my hard-headed girl. She takes a bit more convincing. But anyway, it's got a romance in it. It's got some tragedy and a little twist at the end, and I just had a ball writing it.
Yeah, and is it Calandra? How do you pronounce her name?
Well, I
Cal-
called her Calandra, like calendar,
Oh yeah, Calandra. Oh yeah.
but you
I
can
don't
probably say
know.
it any way you want. No one will
Yeah, I'm like,
correct you.
it is like calendar. It's like calendar with a ra at the end.
Right, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
calendar.
And I mean she has spunk. She's in there interacting with people of different stations, but she is also skilled and talented. She's been trained by her father to have this wonderful skill, but it's putting her in the homes and in these realms that I love, like, you get the glimpse of what it was like in daily life in Rome just
Yeah,
by
yeah.
being with her and following with her, which I think is so fascinating. When you were talking about those epic movies, I'm like, oh, this is what it reminds me of, those epic movies. And then also one of my other favorite series is Francine Rivers, her A Voice in the Wind, and
Oh,
those
Mark of the Lion
Arc
series.
of the Lycan series, which is
Mhm.
just like you just are so like you're there. And that's what I
Yeah,
love in general about your writing, Angie. It's the details. You could tell you've done the research and you understand it's not vague. It's like you are completely from page one part of the story, which is so interesting. But, and of course, these situations happen looking back now in history, like, oh, the Jews and these new Christians had to shelter all these people. Like, talk
yeah,
about,
yeah.
getting out of their normal things that they were doing, and then they're presented with the gospel by people loving them and caring for them.
Absolutely. That
Yeah.
was it. It was love that attracted her father gets saved first. Oh, and the whole conundrum of the book, the goal is her father gets hired by this high senator guy
Mhm.
to do a statue of Nero. And he wants it to be, huge, amazing, and all that. But during the Great Fire, he's hit on the head by a falling beam, and he goes blind. And
Mm.
so Calandra has to learn how to do this for him, to be his hands. And before she had just been like a painter. Did you know that all those beautiful Roman and Greek statues we see now, they were painted originally?
Oh, wow.
They
That
were,
makes sense because I've seen some of the Pompeii stuff,
yeah,
that they've unburied. How would you say that? Unburied, yeah. And
yeah,
there was painted, like, these things were
oh yeah,
painted and all the mosaic, like, it was amazing. Now we just see the white, like,
yes.
the white, yeah, the stone,
Yeah,
yeah.
but the Romans loved color, what we would consider gaudy color, I mean, bright reds and yellows. And so her original job was she painted, eyelashes on the eyes of the statues. And, she was a detail painter, but she has to learn how to sculpt this humongous statue. And then I had to learn how they did it enough to make it work. But anyway, I got so tickled at so many things the Romans did. They were amazingly sophisticated. The night that he's going to go get his commission, they're invited to dinner at the senator's house. And so her father gives her some money and sends her off to the Roman version of a beauty parlor.
Uh-huh.
And so the lady shows her all these coins that have various empresses' face, heads on them. And it's like, pick your hairstyle. Which one do you
Oh
want?
my
The
goodness.
Claudia, the Procula, the whatever. So she picks one. And then the lady puts her in this chair and says, okay, hair plucker. And this woman comes out of the back with these Roman tweezers and they proceed to pluck all the hair from her underarms. And it's just horrible. I mean, it's
Oh,
painful.
that
And
would be, yeah,
so from
horrible.
head to toe, I know they do her over and do her hair. And then when she gets home, her father, the fire hasn't happened yet. It's like, who are you? Because she looks so different. But they say one must suffer to be beautiful, even in ancient Rome, especially
Yeah.
in ancient Rome.
Especially in ancient Rome, which is so funny because one question that I wrote down, because you are known for the incredible historical details that you have in your books. So I was going to ask, what is the most fascinating or shocking thing you uncovered when researching Nero's Rome? Is that the most fascinating or shocking, or is there something else that you're like, oh, I had no idea
Well,
about
that
this?
was certainly one of them. Oh, let me think. There was so much. Okay, and I won't say this fits into the plot, but maybe it does.
Okay.
Um, um, they had prostitutes. I mean, it was
Mm.
not considered necessarily a bad thing to service these women, and so I wondered, how do they not have babies? So what would happen is, if an unwanted quote unquote baby was born, there were these columns scattered through the city called column lactaria. I guess the plural would be columns lactarium, maybe. And so they would take these children there and they would place them at the base of these columns. And then in the morning, people who wanted to adopt a child would come in, pick up a good looking baby, and take it home. And suddenly it just appeared in this nobleman's household. Um, and by the end of the day, the slave traders would come by and pick up the leftovers. And
Oh my goodness. I've never heard of this before.
yeah, and
Wow.
women, noble women who didn't want to breastfeed their babies, would take a coin and snap it in half and put a little hole in it and put it around the baby's neck. And they would leave their babies there for a wet nurse to pick up. And then after 2 or 3 years, they would go looking for the child that matched the coin that they had, and then they would take their child back. I mean, bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, the wet nurse, did they get paid for that, or they just
I
want
think
to?
they would pay them. Well, I know I wrote another book set in the silent years, and they paid wet nurses. They signed contracts and everything. So I'm
Yeah.
sure they did. Yeah.
Oh, it is so fascinating, and I think we're so sophisticated and things are so modern, and, like, back in the olden days, things were such an easier time. It depends what olden days you are talking about, because ancient Rome is definitely not one of those days where,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
and the merging of cultures, we think we're so, there's we're so connected with other cultures, but Rome, like you said, you talked about all roads lead to Rome, and so there's a lot
Yeah.
of cultures. Prisoners were taken to Rome.
Uh huh.
So as you're setting up for this book, first of all, you have the Christian element, these
Uh
Christians
huh.
from the previous book. You have that element. You have the element of this great fire, which is, I mean, talk about internal conflict, external conflict. You have this main character. Um, did you ever get in a point when you're in the middle of writing, like, what am I going to do with this? Or did it just all flow naturally? Because sometimes you build up so much conflict that's like, how am I going to get my character out of this? Or how am I going to make this seem plausible? Um, how did it go in the writing of this novel that you were able to tie everything together with so many complex elements?
Wow. Well, I was pre-plot, not a detailed
Hmm.
outline, but enough of an
Hmm.
outline that I know how it's going to end. But my biggest problem was that it took so many years, and I had to stick to the actual years of history. So the Great Fire
Hmm.
was in AD 54, but Nero was not killed until several years later, and I knew I wanted Nero's death to happen at the end of the book,
Hmm.
because everybody in the whole world breathed a sigh of relief when he was gone. So I had her working on the statue, and it was pretty involved. I mean, it would have taken years, but day after day, page after page of I'll get up and work on my statue today. It gets kind of old. So I had a thought. Let me chase it. Let me get it back. Oh, so I needed some more conflict or something to drive, and I didn't even discover this until the second or third version, draft. Might have even been after I submitted the book. Um, and it worked perfectly. I discovered that the Romans had a law. You had to get married. Women had to marry, I think, by age 22, and men had to marry by age 25. And if you got divorced or widowed, you had to remarry quickly. It all began with Claudius. If you've watched the movie Cleopatra, all right, remember Julius Caesar came and then he got murdered, and then young Claudius, not Claudius, he was later. But what's his name? Anyway, the young
It's
guy.
been too long ago. I can't. I don't know.
It's on the tip of my tongue, but he was really big on restoring virtue and family values to Rome.
Mm.
And so that was part of it. They passed these laws saying we need marriages and we need babies. Actually, America's sort of in the same situation today. Our birth rate has fallen too low. But they were so inundated by slaves and all these foreigners that they kept bringing in as conquests of the wars that
Mm.
the emperors realized we need more Romans. We've got to keep a steady supply of Roman babies. And so, of course, in my story of Calandra is so busy and intent and focused on working on that statue that she hasn't really given any thought to getting married. And my young romantic interest, Hadrian, he's kind of the same way because he's been placed in charge of helping rebuild Rome, and so I got to add that question about you have to get married or pay
Oh.
a tax. And so they both just decide, well, we're just going to pay the tax because we have more things going on than to worry about getting hitched at this point. But it added a nice, interesting conundrum that I didn't even know about when I started writing.
I love when all those things go together, and I bet that moment when you discover that, you're like, "Ooh, that's like that just makes everything work." And
Yeah,
it's so
yeah.
fun when you get those moments. And I know you also have doctorates in biblical studies and theology, like so it's this knowledge that you have been building. You're able to form the world, but I love that, your your books turned in or on a later draft, and you're like still researching and still finding things that are gonna tie into this book. Are you always learning and reading and discovering things, as you go along?
Yes, I mean, many a time I've like had it in the final stages and then discovered something in the proofread and gone, "Oh wait, I just lied. That's not true." And like, for instance, the Jews' use of the name Hashem instead of the name of God, they say Hashem, which means the name. So in
Mm.
my New Testament series, I had them using Hashem, and then I worship at a Messianic synagogue, and my rabbi said,
Oh.
actually, that didn't come about until much, much later, like the fourth or fifth century. And I went, oh, rats. So, in I think it was maybe the fourth book of that series, I did not use Hashem. And I always have a Q&A at the end because I know readers want to know, did you make
Mhm.
that up or did that really happen? And so I put, you used to use Hashem and you didn't use it here. Why? And I said, because I learned I didn't say it then. So yeah.
I love those historical notes and those, notes from the author. I love reading those things. I love, like, hearing the behind the scenes or did you know this or this is actually true. And, there's historical fiction where people just sort of just making stuff up. And I'm like, "Come on, like, it's there, like, the information's there,
Oh, yeah.
go and
Yeah.
find it." It's so important to honor what was really going on, and it makes it so more impactful to know that these are the things that Christians face. This is what was
Yeah.
happening in this time period. It just knowing that real people, and of course, these are fictional stories, fictional characters, but the events and
Mhm.
the and what Christians face and their emotions and the pain and their struggle, all those things. I think it's so important to realize that it might be easy to say like, oh, things are so hard now. And I'm like, oh no, like
Yeah.
we think things are hard, but go back to Nero's time. Things
Oh
are
yeah.
are not as hard now as we say they are. I mean,
Yeah.
someone was mad at you on Facebook. That's not a big deal compared to you being
It's nothing.
accused of starting the fire that destroyed Rome. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
that really doesn't compare.
I
Um,
like to say that our fiction is not actual, but it's true, because
mhm.
our themes are true and our premise is true, and much of what happens in our historical fiction is not only true but actual. It actually happened, and
Yeah.
I think all the best fiction is true, um, as far as those elements go. And when I
Yes.
read a novel that has a false message or a false worldview, I just put it down and go,
Yeah.
what a wasted
Waste
part of
of
my
time and
life.
waste of money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so my question is, thinking of all the research you've done, if you could step into your character's world in ancient Rome for a day, where would you go? What would you eat, and maybe who would you see?
Ah, I would not go to the Colosseum.
No.
You know, I watch this a couple of weeks ago. I don't know why, but my Facebook feed was filled with all these videos of lions eating baby goats, and I was like,
You're like, "What? What
why?
did I say or do that ended up putting that there?"
I know, why am I looking at all these sweet animals being massacred? Oh, and the crocodiles, they are the worst. I absolutely hated it. But yeah, but a lot of times we castigate the Romans for being lovers of blood sport, etc.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's really not that much different than a football game or a MMA, is that what the word is, match, or where they do everything but kill each other,
Right,
you know.
right.
And I think we're not that different. And these people frothing in the fans, it's and the stands, it's the same thing. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I wouldn't want to be a slave. I wouldn't want to be the emperor's wife. I wouldn't want to. I'd probably just want to be Calandra and sit in my studio painting
Yeah, there you
statues.
go. There you go. Meet with some Christians that are hanging out and see what
There
they're
you
doing
go.
and listen to
Hmm.
their stories. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Okay, so this is the third in the series. The title is The Daughter of Rome. What were the first two books in the series?
The first one was called "The Woman from Lydia," and I make the case in the book that her name was probably Euodia, even though Acts calls her Lydia, but she was from the province of Lydia. And
Mm,
when Paul writes his letter to the Philippians, he mentions two women, Euodia and Syntyche. And surely he started this church, his first church, in this woman's house. So surely he would have called her by name if she were named Lydia, but he didn't. So anyway, I went with Euodia. So it's the woman from Lydia, and the second one is the Sisters of Corinth. That's a good girl versus bad girl. It's kind of like Cinderella, the stepsisters,
ooh,
and
yeah.
yeah, that kind of thing. And then this one, the daughter of Rome.
Oh, I love it. I cannot wait to listen to it. I started reading it, but I can go so much faster in a book when it comes out on Audible. So it's not out, it's not released. When we're recording this, it's not released yet. I'm like already
Uh,
pre-ordered this baby. I'm like, yes, I'm gonna listen to this because it is just so fascinating. I love the story. I love just immediately you start with her painting on eyelashes. And yeah, and I did. I'm
yeah,
like, oh yeah, painted. Painted, the statues were painted. Okay. It's just those kind of things that just hook you and you start right in the middle of her life, and it's just great. Now, I know you've written so many genres from biblical fiction, contemporary stories. How do you decide what to write next?
well, lately, it's what my publisher wants, and they want
Mhm.
biblical fiction. But honestly, I'm reaching the point now where I don't like writing what other people have already written, especially if there's been
Mm,
lots of people writing about this whoever. And so
mhm.
I'm kind of running out of things to write about biblically. So I'm kind of missing my contemporaries, to be honest. But I
Yeah.
did sign a contract for the Matriarch series. So I finished Sarah. It's coming
Ooh.
out in the fall. Boy, that was an eye opener. And I'm currently writing Rebecca and first drafting, my least favorite part of the process. And then I'm going to write another book that combines Rachel and Leah.
Oh,
And
wow.
so after that, I'm not sure where I'll go, but we'll see.
That's what I'm reading with my kids during homeschool right now. We just, got to the part where God told, Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, and my
Yeah.
14-year-old's like, "This is uncivilized." And I know he knows the story. I'm like, "Okay," but he was just being dramatic, but it's so fun, like, when you really read these, like, when you read the stories that we're so used to reading, you're like, "This is really twisted." I think they said that too, like, "Mom, this is really twisted." I'm like, "Well, you know what's gonna happen." But at the moment, you don't know. Like, we know the end of the story, but he was, like, loading up his son to go sacrifice
Yeah.
him. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's another thing they said. They said, "This Bible, I know that it's good, but this stuff is, like, really hard in here." I mean, there's hard things in the Bible, and I think so many times, just people think like, "Oh, you're writing about the Bible, like, maybe you should write about real life or harder stuff." And I know this is like there's hard issues, heart issues. There's ups and downs and conflicts and jealousies and so many things. There's so much drama in the Bible, which
Yeah.
in a way makes it easy for
Yeah.
fiction because we have to add
Yeah.
conflict.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like, oh, how am I gonna how am I gonna deal with this subject in fiction? I mean, it's just there's just a lot. Like Mary and Sisters. That's gonna be interesting, Angie, for you to
Oh,
work on
yeah.
that.
Well, just even now, I'm still first drafting Rebecca. And, she knew when she was still pregnant, the Bible says she sought the Lord, and God told her, Adonai told her that she had two guys in her womb, and the younger would serve the older.
Mhm.
All right, so the guys grow up, the twins, but yet Isaac favors Esau, the elder one. Even though he's marrying heathen Canaanite women, he's rebellious, he disobeys, he's awful. And Jacob's devout and loves his mother and is quiet and kind. And you think, what's wrong with Isaac? I mean, why isn't he saying no? But God said. And
Yeah.
so I think in my story, he's going to be a little resentful about,
Mhm.
God put me on an altar. What was that about? I
Yeah.
mean, surely in retrospect, he must have wondered, was I just a symbol? Was I whatever? So I don't know. I'm still turning thoughts over in my mind, but I thought there has to be some reason why he went so opposite what he knew was the will of God.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Or did he not want because she was the one that had that prophecy and he wasn't the one? I don't know. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And then I was thinking because as we were reading too, Jacob, he helped his mom, like his mom deceived his dad, with the the hair on his skin and making up the stew, but then he got deceived like so many times. It's like you
Yeah.
got what
Yeah.
you were what was coming to you, buddy, because you're the one that
Uh
was
huh.
playing these tricks on your dad, and then Laban went and deceived you. I mean, there's a lot of trickery and deception in that book.
Yeah. Nobody's being straight with each other. Yeah.
No one's being straight with each other. Yeah, yeah. Oh, so I love it. I love biblical fiction. I love just how novels like this bring the Bible to life, and when you
Yeah.
learn more, it just helps you understand the Bible more. And that novels can do that, and it would help us understand biblical times. It could understand themes and gods and love and what it looks like, even in really hard situations.
Mm-hmm.
So I cannot wait to finish this. It's so great. But where can people go to get more information about these books and all your other books?
Well, my website is angelahuntbooks.com. So that's easy, and that's kind of got everything by category: historical, contemporaries, children's, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's probably the best place. And then there are links to all the places where you can purchase the books online, or any bookstore can order them for you.
Absolutely, yeah, and go to your library. I always tell people to go to your library and ask them to order because they usually have online, recommend a book or just go to the front desk. They're seeking people to let them know what they want to order, and when you ask and request a library to get the book, then there's lots of people that can read it because it's there on the shelf. So
What a
that
great
really,
idea.
yeah, helps get the word out.
Yeah,
Again, the book is The Daughter of Rome, and the cover is absolutely gorgeous. I
isn't it?
love it so much. So definitely check that out. But Angie, thanks for being here today.
Oh, well, thanks for asking me. I enjoyed it so much.